The world holds its breath in the late Cretaceous night, a soft and ancient silence blanketing the land in a velvety embrace. A heavy moon, pale and full, casts a gentle silver light over fern forests and broad rivers, illuminating a realm of quiet giants and hidden mysteries. There is no hurry here, no frantic rush, only the slow, steady turning of the earth, the patient rhythm of a planet deep in thought. The air is thick with the scent of damp soil and cycads, a fragrance as old as time itself, and every rustle of leaves or distant ripple of water seems part of a whispered secret, meant only for those willing to listen closely. In this tranquil darkness, dinosaurs of impossible size and grace move with a ponderous elegance, their forms softened by shadow and starlight. They are not monsters here, not in this hushed hour. They are simply part of the landscape, breathing, resting, dreaming. Their immense bodies become extensions of the earth, their slow movements a meditation. One can almost feel the warmth rising from their hides, the subtle vibrations of their footfalls absorbed by the soft ground. It is a world both alien and deeply familiar, a place where curiosity is met not with fear, but with a calm and welcoming stillness. Above, unfamiliar constellations glitter in a sky untouched by city lights, their patterns telling stories lost to human memory. The Milky Way spills across the heavens like a river of crushed diamonds, so bright and close it feels almost within reach. Under that eternal canopy, time seems to stretch and soften, inviting the mind to wander among possibilities and gentle wonders. What sounds might drift through these forests? What dreams might unfold behind the heavy-lidded eyes of a sleeping titan? The night does not answer, but it holds space for every quiet question, every soft speculation. This is a world built not on noise but on presence, a deep, abiding sense of being. It invites not analysis but immersion, not dissection but drift. To step into this ancient night is to let go of certainty and embrace the soothing unknown, to float in a sea of half-glimpsed shapes and half-heard rhythms. It is a place where imagination is not escape but return, a coming home to a quieter, slower, more generous world. And as the mind settles into that warmth, that deep time hush, it begins to remember what it feels like to simply be, to rest, to wonder without urgency, held in the gentle arms of a forgotten age. How did the great Brachiosaurus rest its impossible body when weariness finally claimed it? This gentle giant, whose neck stretched toward the canopy like a living bridge between earth and sky, must have found repose in ways both mysterious and profoundly peaceful. Under the soft wash of starlight, its colossal form became a study in stillness, a monument to quietude in a world already steeped in silence. One could imagine it pausing at the edge of a clearing, its breath slowing, its great limbs settling into the yielding earth as the day's last warmth faded from the stones around it. Perhaps it did not lie down at all, but remained standing, locked in a light and watchful doze. Its legs, like ancient tree trunks, might have borne its weight even in sleep, a testament to evolutionary grace and strength. The long neck could have curved gently, the head resting against a shoulder or simply hanging loose, swaying almost imperceptibly with each slow, deep breath. In such a pose, the Brachiosaurus would have seemed less a creature of bone and muscle and more a part of the landscape itself, a hill that breathed, a forest that dreamed. Or maybe, in moments of deepest rest, it did allow itself to fold onto the ground, its neck stretching out along the fern-strewn earth like a great serpentine river of flesh and scale. The ground would have accepted that weight without protest, cushioning the giant in a bed of moss and soft soil. One could picture the slow, deliberate motion of its settling, the careful folding of limbs, the final exhalation that stirred the fronds at its feet. There would have been no suddenness, no violence, only a gradual surrender to gravity and fatigue, as graceful as a cloud settling over a valley. In either posture, sleep for such a being must have been a profound and gentle state. Its immense heart would have beat a slow, steady rhythm, a drum felt more than heard through the earth. Its eyes, large and liquid, would have closed not in defensiveness but in trust. Trust in the safety of the herd, the cover of night, the benevolence of a world that allowed for such vulnerability. There was no fear in that rest, only the deep animal certainty that it was held, that it belonged. Watching from a distance in the mind's eye, one felt not smallness but expansion. The sheer scale of its repose invited the observer into a larger sense of peace, a slower rhythm of being. The Brachiosaurus did not sleep like something that had to hide or hurry. It slept like the land itself slept, deeply, openly, without reservation. And in that image of a 40-ton creature resting unafraid under the stars, there was an ancient lullaby, a reassurance that some forms of strength are measured not in power, but in the ability to be still, to be soft, to simply be. A soft rhythm began to emerge from the darkness, a gentle tide of breath moving through the slumbering herd. The great sauropods lay together in a loose circle, their massive bodies forming a living fortress of warmth and safety under the star-dusted sky. Each inhalation was a deep, resonant pull of air, steady as the turning of seasons, and each exhalation a warm mist that rose faintly in the cool night air, catching the starlight like ghostly offerings to the constellations above. They breathed as one organism, a symphony of slow, measured life, their collective presence a bulwark against the silent unknowns of the Cretaceous night. From a distance they might have been mistaken for low hills or weathered rock formations, so still and immense were their resting forms. But up close, the subtle signs of life were everywhere. The occasional twitch of a flank as a dream passed through a sleeping mind, the soft shift of a tail sweeping through ferns, the slow blink of an eye reflecting the moon's pale glow. Their hides, textured like ancient bark, rose and fell with the unhurried cadence of their breathing, and the heat radiating from them warmed the earth beneath, creating a microclimate of comfort in the vast, cool darkness. Above them, the Milky Way arched in a glittering river, its light so clear and vivid it seemed almost within reach of the highest browsing branches these giants might have sought in daylight. But now, in rest, they were earthbound and peaceful, their long necks curled gently beside them or resting across one another's backs in gestures of unconscious companionship. There was no tension in their forms, no alertness in their posture, only the profound relaxation of creatures who knew safety in numbers, who trusted the night and one another. The air around them hummed with the soft energy of their slumber, a vibration felt more than heard, like the distant rumble of a peaceful thunderstorm or the deep resonance of a cello string. It was a sound that invited stillness in return, that slowed the pulse and eased the mind into matching its tranquil rhythm. One could imagine standing among them, not as an intruder, but as a witness to one of the planet's most ancient and gentle rituals, the rest of the giants. And in that shared silence, under that endless sky, there was a sense of timelessness. These creatures, in their vulnerability and their grandeur, were part of something larger than fear or survival. They were part of the Earth's own dream, breathing in time with its slow, patient heart. Their presence was a reassurance, a living testament to the fact that even the largest beings in the right moment could be soft, could be still, could be at peace, and as the night deepened around them, their rhythmic breaths became a lullaby for the world itself, a gentle promise that all was well, and that rest was not just possible, but sacred. What music did the night hold when the giants were awake? In the spaces between their slow breaths and the rustle of primeval leaves, other sounds must have drifted softer, subtler, woven into the very fabric of the air. These were the voices of dinosaurs, not as roars or shrieks, but as whispers, murmurs, calls that blended with the wind and water into a natural symphony. One could imagine a low, resonant rumble from a parasaurolophus, its crest acting as a natural instrument, sending vibrations through the ground like a cello's hum felt deep in the bones, or the soft, questioning hoot of a small theropod from the shadows, a sound so gentle it might be mistaken for an owl, were owls to exist in this world. These calls were not meant for alarm or aggression, but for connection, a language of comfort and coordination in the velvety dark. A mother's croon to her nestlings, a mate reassuring tone, the contented murmur of a herd moving as one mind through the moon-washed ferns. Some sounds may have been too low for human ears to catch, felt rather than heard, like the infrasongs of whales traveling through deep oceans. Others might have been melodic, almost bird-like, trills and warbles that rose and fell with the breeze, stitching the night together with threads of sound. And how these whispers would have mingled with the environment. The sigh of wind through cycad fronds, the plink of water droplets from broad leaves after a brief rain, the distant chime of a stream flowing over smooth stones. Together, they formed a soundscape that was neither silent nor noisy, but perfectly balanced, a harmonic convergence of life and landscape. It was a lullaby composed by evolution itself, each species adding its unique voice to the chorus without overwhelming the whole. To listen, truly listen, was to understand that this world was not a place of constant struggle, but of delicate interplay. Sound was not merely communication, it was atmosphere, emotion, a binding force, the soft rumble of a nearby ankylosaur settling for the night, the faint click of a small colossal moving through undergrowth, the breathy exhalation of pterosaurs gliding high above, all these layered into a tapestry of auditory calm, a reassurance that every creature had its place and its part in the nightly song. And in that symphony, there was a deep and abiding peace. The sounds did not jar or startle. They soothed, they grounded, they invited the listener deeper into the dream of the Cretaceous. They were the whispers of a world that knew how to be quiet without being silent, how to speak without shouting, how to exist in a state of graceful, audible harmony. To imagine them was to feel the mind itself slow down, attuning to older, gentler frequencies, to remember that long before words there was music, and that music was the first and kindest language of all. What palette did the ancient world wear when no human eye was there to see it? The question of dinosaur coloration drifts through the imagination like smoke, elusive, beautiful, endlessly open to interpretation. Were these magnificent creatures cloaked in muted earth tones, their hides and feathers blending seamlessly into the fern forests and river mud, a lesson in survival through subtlety? Or did they blaze with unexpected brilliance, adorned in hues of crimson, sapphire, and gold, turning the Cretaceous into a living gallery of iridescent art? One theory suggests practicality, the need to disappear. A hadrosaur might have worn patterns of soft brown and gray, its back dappled with shadowy markings that broke its outline among the trees. A small theropod could have been feathered in shades of charcoal and moss, perfect for melting into the undergrowth where it hunted insects or small prey. In this version of the past, color was a language of concealment, a gentle agreement between hunter and hunted written in tones of ochre, umber, and forest green. There was a quiet dignity in such camouflage, a harmony with the landscape that spoke of deep belonging. But another possibility invites a more vibrant dream. Perhaps many dinosaurs were riotously colored, using brilliant feathers and vivid skin not to hide but to dazzle. Imagine a male raptor raising feathered arms in display, not in threat but in courtship, a fan of emerald and copper catching the low sun, each movement a silent poem of attraction, or a ceratopsian whose frill flushed with delicate pinks and blues during social rituals, a soft shifting canvas of communication. In this vision, color was connection, a way to say without sound, I am here, I am alive, see me. Between these two ideas lies a spectrum of beauty both seen and unseen. Some dinosaurs may have been iridescent, their colors changing with the angle of light, a hidden magnificence revealed only in certain moments, like a secret shared between the sun and the creature it illuminated. A pterosaur's wing membrane might have glimmered with oil-slick rainbows when it banked in flight, a fleeting miracle against the sky. Even the giants, the sauropods, could have carried subtle patterns along their flanks, halls, and stripes visible only up close, like intimate tattoos known only to their young and their mates. To wander through these theories is to wander through a gallery of lost masterpieces. Each hypothesis paints the past in a different light, each brushstroke altering the mood and meaning of the world that was. It is a meditation on beauty itself, not as a fixed quality, but as an evolving conversation between life and its environment. The colors of dinosaurs, whether subdued or spectacular, were part of that dialogue, a visual music that played across scales, feathers, and skin. And in the end, the truth may be that both dreams are real, that the Cretaceous was a world of both shadow and light, of hidden softness and breathtaking display. It is a comforting thought that such beauty existed long before we did, not for our sake but for its own, a world where color was felt, lived and loved in ways we can only gently imagine, a symphony of hues lost to time, yet forever painting the edges of our dreams. Under the soft glow of a setting moon, the world began to reveal its hidden palette, in subtle, shimmering glimpses. Iridescent feathers, adorning the smaller bird-like dinosaurs, caught the faint light, not with garish brilliance, but with a gentle shifting luminescence. A small dromaeosaur, stirring in the pre-dawn stillness, lifted a feathered arm, and the delicate structures of its plumage fractured the pale light into soft rainbows of violet and green, a private spectacle for the waking world. This was not color for confrontation, but for connection, a visual whisper in the half-light, a language of softness and social grace. As the first hints of dawn tinged the eastern sky with lavender and peach, these subtle displays took on new meaning. Small clusters of feathered creatures began to rouse, not with alarm, but with a quiet communal stirring. They preened one another's feathers with delicate beaks, their movements slow and ritualistic, reinforcing bonds without a single sound. In the tender light, their iridescence became a medium of affection, each shift in hue a silent reassurance, a non-verbal pledge of companionship and care. It was a form of communication deeper than call or gesture, a shared experience of beauty that knitted them together. Larger dinosaurs, too, may have used color in these soft, social moments. The frills of ceratopsians washed in the gentle dawn could have flushed with faint pinks and blues during peaceful interactions, a greeting between herd members, a calming signal from parent to offspring. Even the great sauropods, whose size might suggest indifference to such delicacies, may have carried subtle patterns along their necks and backs, visible only in the low angle of early light, serving as visual guides for their young, or markers of recognition within the herd. This was a world where color softened edges and deepened bonds. It turned potential conflict into calm interaction, strangers into familiars, isolation into community. Under the soft dawn light, every iridescent shimmer and muted pattern contributed to an atmosphere of trust and tranquility. There were no sharp contrasts here, no jarring signals, only a harmony of hues that soothed the eye and settled the spirit. Watching this imagined scene unfold in the mind's eye was like witnessing a slow, graceful dance of light and life. Color was not merely decoration, it was an integral part of how these creatures experienced their world and each other. It was a gentle force, as calming as a whispered secret, as reassuring as a touch. And in that soft, dawn-lit world, where feathers caught the light and scales held the memory of moonlight, there was a profound sense of peace, a reminder that beauty, in all its forms, has always been a language of kindness, a currency of calm in the deep and dreaming past. Deep within the chest of every sleeping giant, a heart beat with the steady, unhurried rhythm of a world without clocks. For the immense Brachiosaurus, each thud was a slow, resonant pulse felt through the very ground it rested upon, a metronome set to the pace of geological time. That great heart, perhaps the size of a boulder, moved blood through miles of vessels with a patient tidal force, each beat a reminder that some forms of strength are measured not in speed but in endurance. In the quiet of the night, that rhythm became part of the landscape's own music, a bass note in the symphony of stillness, felt more than heard, a vibration that spoke of immense life held in perfect calm. Smaller creatures, by contrast, carried quicker, lighter heartbeats, the rapid patter of a troodon resting in the ferns, or the swift bird-like flutter of a microraptor curled in a high nest. Their pulses were like soft rain against broad leaves, a busy but gentle rhythm that spoke of alertness and delicate energy held in reserve. Even in sleep, their hearts did not fully slow, keeping time with a world that required readiness, yet their rest was no less deep, no less peaceful. It was a different kind of tranquility, not the profound stillness of the giants, but the quiet hum of a life lived closer to the edge of moments. And between these extremes lay every variation: the medium-paced drum of a hadrosaur, the slow, heavy thump of an ankylosaur, the measured cadence of a ceratopsian. Each heartbeat was a signature, a personal rhythm that matched the creature's size, metabolism, and place in the great web of life. Yet in rest, all these rhythms softened, harmonized. The quickened pulse of the hunter slowed toward calm. The glacial beat of the giant remained deep and unruffled. Together they created a layered, living lullaby, the percussion section of the night's orchestra, playing a composition written in blood and breath. One could imagine placing a hand against the warm, scale-dusted side of a sleeping dinosaur and feeling that rhythm not as a biological function, but as a poem. The steady thrum of a sauropod's heart was like the Earth's own heartbeat, a sound that predated fear and would outlast memory. The lighter tap of a small theropod's pulse was like a whispered secret, quick and intimate. These were not signs of strain or struggle, but of life in its most essential peaceful state, a reminder that every living thing, no matter its size or speed, shares this inner music. And as the night deepened, these rhythms began to sync, not in fact, but in feeling, a convergence of pulses into one great soft vibration that hummed through the air and soil. It was the sound of the Cretaceous itself, alive and dreaming, each heartbeat a note in a song too vast for any single ear to hear, yet felt by all. In that harmony, there was a deep and abiding peace, a knowledge that rest is not the absence of motion, but motion in its gentlest form. The heart beats on, steady and sure, a quiet drum keeping time in the chest of the world, reminding all who listen that to be alive is to be part of this rhythm, this soft, endless song. In the quiet, moon-drenched corners of the Cretaceous world, the most tender of all dramas unfolded, the quiet vigil of dinosaur parents guarding their nests. Under the sheltering fronds of cycads, or in carefully scraped hollows of warm earth, clutches of eggs lay like precious stones, each one holding the promise of new life. The parent, whether a small theropod or a larger herbivore, settled over them with a stillness that spoke of deep instinct and profound care. Its body became a living incubator, radiating a gentle, constant heat that seeped into the shells, a warmth that was the first comfort the developing young would ever know. The posture of these guardians was one of absolute devotion. They curled around their nests, their bodies forming a protective barrier against the cool night air and any potential disturbance. Their heads often rested close to the eggs, as if listening for the faintest signs of life within the soft scrape of a tiny limb adjusting position, the nearly imperceptible shift of an embryo dreaming in its private sea. There was no impatience in this watch, no restlessness, only a patient, unwavering presence that seemed to say without words, "I am here. You are safe. Take your time." Heat was not the only gift these parents gave. Their mere presence was a shield, a declaration to the world that this patch of ground was sacred. Predators, sensing that calm determination, would think twice before approaching. The parents' slow, even breathing created a rhythm that the unhatched young might have felt through the shells, a steady, reassuring pulse that was the opposite of threat. It was a lullaby of safety, a vibration that promised a world waiting with warmth and protection. One could imagine the subtle adjustments the parent made through the long nights, shifting weight to ensure even heating, using a beak or claw to gently turn an egg, the way a bird might, to promote healthy development. These movements were slow, deliberate, almost meditative. There was no hurry, no anxiety, only the deep, ancient knowledge of how to care for what had not yet fully arrived. It was a ritual older than memory, written into bone and blood, and over it all, the moon looked down, its light silvering the patient form of the guardian and glinting softly on the eggshells. The night was full of sounds, the sigh of wind, the call of distant creatures, but here, by the nest, there was only silence and warmth. It was a pocket of profound peace in a vast world, a small circle of love under the stars. In that image of a dinosaur curled protectively around its future, there was a timeless reassurance, long before words, before cities, before anything humans might recognize. There was this tenderness, vigilance, the quiet, fierce grace of caring for the next generation. It was a mystery, yes, but one that felt deeply familiar, a reminder that some kinds of love are written in the oldest layers of life, gentle and unbreakable as stone. The first crack was not a sound of violence, but a whisper of emergence, a delicate fracture in the calcified world that had sheltered the hatchling for so long. Inside the egg, a tiny creature stirred, guided by an instinct older than memory, its movements slow and purposeful as it pressed against the weakening shell. From outside, the parent remained still, its massive head lowered close, offering not interference but presence, a warm, breathing promise that the world beyond the shell was safe, was waiting, was soft. One by one, the eggs began to open. Not with sudden breaks, but with a gradual yielding, like flowers unfolding at dawn. Small, damp heads emerged, blinking in the dim light, their eyes large and dark with the wonder of first sight. The world they entered was muted, filtered through the protective shadow of the parent's body and the gentle gloom of early morning. There were no sharp edges here, no jarring brightness, only the soft, familiar scent of the nest, the warmth of the parent's scales, and the comforting rhythm of its breath. The parent did not hurry the process. It watched with a patience that seemed to slow time itself, occasionally offering the gentlest of nudges with its snout or beak, not to force but to encourage, to reassure. Its touch was feather-light, a barely there pressure that seemed to say, "I am here, you are not alone." The hatchlings, still clumsy and wet from their shells, responded to that touch with instinctive trust, pushing a little harder, stretching limbs that had never known open air. Soon, the nest was alive with slow, tentative movement. The hatchlings wobbled on unsteady legs, their small bodies still curled from the confines of the egg. They pressed close to one another and to the parent, seeking warmth and security in the cool morning air. Their first sounds were not cries but soft, breathy cheeps, whispers of existence, acknowledgments of life. The parent answered with a low humming rumble from deep in its chest, a vibration that passed through the nest and into the hatchlings, calming them, grounding them. As the light grew stronger, details emerged, the fine down on their skin, the large, curious eyes taking in the shapes of ferns and the vast, gentle form above them. They did not yet understand danger or distance. They knew only warmth, presence, and the slow, sure beat of the heart that had guarded them even before they drew breath. This was their entire world, a circle of safety, a first lesson in belonging. And in that soft, dim world of first moments, there was a profound peace. The struggle of emergence was not forgotten, but it was gentled by the certainty of care. The hatchlings, guided by instinct and the subtle cues of their parent, began to explore the nest, not with fear, but with a dawning curiosity that was itself a form of trust. They nuzzled against one another, tasted the air with tiny tongues, and gradually, slowly, learned what it meant to be alive in a world that had waited for them with infinite patience. This was the mystery of the nest, not just the miracle of birth, but the miracle of welcome. It was a silent promise kept across millions of years, written not in stone, but in softness, in warmth, in the gentle nudges that said, "Come, the world is ready for you." And as the hatchlings settled against their parent's side, their breathing syncing with its own, they drifted into their first sleep outside the shell, cradled in the oldest safety of all, the safety of being loved. The horizon was a soft, unbroken line where earth met sky in a seamless embrace, and across that vast expanse, the herd moved like a slow, living river. Their migration was not a hurried flight, but a gradual, purposeful drift, a journey measured not in days or miles, but in the patient turning of seasons and the shifting angle of the sun. Each step was deliberate, each movement synchronized with an ancient rhythm known only to them, a silent map written in memory and instinct. The air was cool and carried the scent of distant rains and blooming flora, a promise of renewal that guided them ever onward, under skies that shifted from pale morning gold to deep afternoon blue. The dinosaurs walked with a serene determination. Their massive feet sank into soft soil and crushed fern beds, leaving temporary impressions that would soon be erased by wind or weather, a transient record of their passage. The young stayed close to their parents, their smaller strides keeping pace with the measured plod of the adults, while scouts ranged ahead, their heads occasionally lifting to taste the air or survey the route. There was no urgency in their progress, only the deep abiding certainty that the path was known and the destination would be reached in its own time. As they moved, the landscape itself seemed to welcome them. Rivers widened to offer shallow crossings, forests thinned to allow easy passage, and open plains stretched out like invitations. The herd's presence was a quiet disturbance in the stillness, a rustling of leaves, the soft thud of footfalls, the occasional low rumble of communication, but it was a disturbance that felt natural, even harmonious. They were not invaders in this land, they were part of its breath, its pulse, its slow and seasonal story. At midday, when the sun hung high and warm, the herd would pause. Some individuals lowered themselves to the ground, resting heavy bodies in the shade of cycads or beside meandering streams. Others remained standing, dozing lightly as they chewed mouthfuls of tender vegetation, their jaws moving in a steady meditative rhythm. The young took advantage of these pauses to explore nearby thickets or splash in shallow water, their playfulness a gentle counterpoint to the adults' calm. There was no anxiety in these stops, no fear of falling behind, only trust in the journey's inherent timing. By late afternoon they were moving again, their shadows stretching long and distorted across the terrain. The light turned golden, then rose-tinted, as the sun began its descent. In that softening glow the herd seemed almost ethereal, dust motes dancing around their legs, the heat of the day rising from their backs in visible shimmers, their forms blending into the hazy, dreamlike quality of the evening. They did not quicken their pace as darkness approached. Instead, they settled for the night wherever they were, folding into rest with the same unhurried grace that had carried them through the day. And under the star-strewn sky, the migration continued in their dreams, a forward momentum that needed no waking effort. They slept where they lay, their bodies aligned with the invisible path, their minds perhaps tracing the route in some deep ancestral memory. The moon watched over them, a silent companion on their endless journey, and the wind whispered across the plains, carrying the scent of the lands they had yet to tread. It was a pilgrimage without haste, a movement without rush, a testament to the beauty of slow, purposeful travel in a world that asked for nothing more than presence and patience. At the water's edge, where land yielded to river in a soft, muddy embrace, the Spinosaurus stood as still as the ancient stones that lined the bank. Its immense sail, rising like a jagged crest from its back, caught the fading afternoon light not as a display of aggression, but as a quiet monument to solitude. This was a creature that did not need the comfort of herds or the security of numbers. It found peace in its own company, in the patient watchfulness that came from being both hunter and harmonizer with the world around it. The water, slow and brown with sediment, lapped gently at its massive feet, each ripple a soft punctuation in the otherwise unbroken silence. The Spinosaurus did not fidget or shift its weight impatiently. Its long, narrow snout remained poised just above the surface, eyes fixed on the subtle movements below, the shadow of a fish, the drift of aquatic plants, the occasional bubble rising from the depths. Its posture was one of deep concentration, a meditation in motionlessness that seemed to slow time itself. There was no tension in its limbs, no urgency in its gaze, only a profound, embodied patience that spoke of a life attuned to rhythms older than haste. It was not waiting, it was being, fully and completely, in a moment that stretched into eternity. Around it, the world continued in soft, undramatic motions. Dragonflies with iridescent wings skimmed the water's surface, their flight paths weaving intricate patterns in the air. Small pterosaurs glided low over the river, their shadows fleeting and graceful. The Spinosaurus took no notice of them, its attention reserved for the world beneath the water, a world it understood intimately, a world where time moved even more slowly than it did on land. Its presence was not disruptive but integrative, as though it were another feature of the landscape, a breathing cliffside, a sentient mangrove. As the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in hues of orange and lavender, the Spinosaurus remained. Its stillness was not emptiness, but fullness, a conscious participation in the calm of the evening. One could imagine the thoughts moving through its mind if thoughts they were, not plans or strategies, but sensations, the coolness of the water, the weight of the air, the distant call of another creature, echoing like a memory. It was a mind unburdened by past or future, existing only in the expansive now of the river's edge. When it finally moved, it did so with a grace that belied its size. A slight shift of its head, a slow step forward into slightly deeper water, each motion was fluid, deliberate, almost ceremonial. There was no splash, no sudden violence, only a continuation of its quiet communion with the river. If it struck, it would be with that same unhurried certainty, a movement so seamless it would barely disturb the water's surface. But for now, it was content to simply watch, to be part of the softening light and the soothing sounds of the lapping waves. In that image of a giant standing alone yet perfectly connected to its world, there was a deep sense of peace. The Spinosaurus did not need to be anything other than what it was, a solitary watcher, a patient presence, a living lesson in how to be still and yet entirely alive. And as the stars began to prick the darkening sky, it remained there, a silhouette against the water, blending into the night as gently as it had blended into the day, a guardian of the quiet, a keeper of the calm. Beneath the towering canopy of ancient conifers and the broad sheltering fronds of cycads, a world within a world thrived in near total secrecy. Here, in the dappled shadows and soft undergrowth of the Cretaceous forest, life unfolded on a smaller, quieter scale, a realm of shy, diminutive dinosaurs that lived their entire lives veiled from the eyes of giants. They moved like whispers among the ferns, their forms designed for concealment rather than confrontation, their existence a testament to the beauty of the unseen. To drift through this hidden layer was to enter a sanctuary of subtlety, where every rustle was a secret and every glimpse a gift. These small creatures, parvicursorine theropods no larger than chickens, early mammals with nervous bright eyes and feathered dinosaurs that flitted between low branches like living shadows, were masters of softness. Their footsteps were near silent, their bodies often cloaked in muted patterns of brown, gray, and mossy green that blended seamlessly with the forest floor. They did not announce themselves with calls or displays, instead they communicated through slight shifts in posture, the flick of a tail, or the almost imperceptible tilt of a head. Their world was one of subtle signals and gentle interactions, a language of calm and caution written in movement and stillness. The air in this understory was different, cooler, damper, heavy with the scent of decaying leaves and rich soil. Sunlight filtered down in scattered coins of gold, illuminating motes of pollen and spores drifting lazily in the still air. In these slivers of light, the shy inhabitants might pause, revealing themselves for a fleeting moment before melting back into the protective gloom. A small ornithopod might freeze mid-step, one foot lifted, its body tense yet perfectly camouflaged against a backdrop of bark and fern. A tiny dromaeosaur might cock its head, listening for the soft scuttle of insects in the leaf litter, its feathered arms held close to its body like folded wings. There was no hurry here, no race for dominance or space. Life moved at the pace of patience, a slow uncurling of a fern, the gradual growth of fungus on a fallen log, the deliberate foraging of a small creature taking its time to select the tenderest shoots. Time itself felt softer in this hidden world, stretched and smoothed by the absence of urgency. These beings did not live in the shadow of fear so much as in the embrace of discretion, a conscious choice to remain small, quiet, and unseen, not as a weakness but as a wise and gentle way of being. To imagine them was to appreciate a different kind of strength, not the power of size or speed, but the resilience of subtlety, the grace of going unnoticed. Their lives were rich with minute wonders, the discovery of a dew-covered berry, the careful construction of a hidden nest, the soft preening of feathers in a shaft of accidental sunlight. They asked for nothing more than safety and stillness, and in return they gifted the forest their quiet presence, a reminder that not all lives need be loud or large to be meaningful. In the deep green heart of the woods they were the keepers of calm, the guardians of the gentle, living proof that some of the most beautiful things are those that choose to remain hidden. Within the deeper thickets, where light fell in soft, broken patterns, and the air hung still and cool, the hidden dwellers of the forest engaged in their gentle daily rituals. A pair of small feathered dinosaurs moved with deliberate care through a patch of fiddlehead ferns, their steps so light they barely disturbed the carpet of fallen leaves. They paused often, not from fear, but from a deep attentiveness to their surroundings, dipping their heads to sip water from a cupped leaf, or tilting them to watch a beetle make its slow journey across a twig. Their interactions were silent, communicated through proximity and subtle gesture. One would brush against the other's flank in passing, a touch that spoke of companionship and calm assurance. Elsewhere, a family of modest-sized herbivores browsed contentedly on low-growing cycad shoots, their jaws moving in a steady, meditative rhythm. The only sounds were the soft shredding of vegetation and the occasional rustle as a frond sprang back into place after being released. The young stayed close to the adults, mimicking their movements with earnest clumsiness, their small bodies weaving between the sturdy legs of their parents. There was no sense of urgency in their feeding, no competition for the best leaves, only a shared, tranquil absorption in the simple act of nourishment. Their world was defined not by lack but by plenty, and they took from the forest only what they needed, leaving the rest to grow in peace. In a sun-dappled clearing, a cluster of flowering benitatiles attracted the attention of several tiny bird-like creatures. They moved among the blooms not with frantic energy, but with a kind of reverent curiosity, their beaks delicately probing for nectar or insects. Their feathers, shades of muted green and soft brown, caught the light in fleeting iridescent shimmers, a hidden beauty meant for no audience but themselves and the sun. They did not startle at the shift of a shadow or the fall of a seed. They simply adjusted, flowing with the rhythms of the forest as if they were an extension of its very breath. Beneath it all, the forest floor was alive with softer, tinier movements, the patient journey of a worm through rich soil, the almost invisible scuttle of a millipede, the gradual unfolding of a fungal network like a slow-motion constellation spreading beneath the leaves. These were the unnoticed foundations of the hidden world, the silent workers that turned decay into life, ensuring the continuity of this gentle, layered existence. They asked for no acknowledgement, their purpose fulfilled in darkness and discretion. As evening began to settle, the light softened further, casting long, gentle shadows that blended all forms into a harmonious blur. The forest dwellers began to settle as well, finding secure perches in dense thickets or curling into sheltered hollows at the bases of trees. Their breathing slowed, their movements stilled, and the forest itself seemed to sigh into a deeper quiet. The transition from day to night was not a jarring shift but a seamless blending, a natural surrender to rest. In this hidden realm, peace was not an absence of life, but its fullest expression, a world where beings lived not in conflict with their environment or each other, but in a state of graceful integration. They were the quiet heart of the Cretaceous, the soft pulse beneath the drama of giants, a reminder that sometimes the most profound peace is found not in grandeur, but in gentleness, not in visibility, but in the beautiful, breathing dark. Under the silver gaze of a full moon, the nocturnal hunters began their soft, deliberate dance, a ballet of shadow and silence performed in the deep Cretaceous night. These were not the giants whose slumber dominated the darkness, but smaller, swifter creatures whose lives were attuned to the subtleties of the moonlit world. Their movements were fluid and almost soundless, each step placed with precision on the damp earth, each turn of the head a study and focused calm. They did not rush or startle, they flowed like water over stones. Their presence felt more as a shift in the air than as a disruption. Their eyes, large and adapted to the dimness, caught the faint light and reflected it back in soft, luminous shimmers, ghostly echoes in the dark. A troodon might pause at the edge of a clearing, its feathered form blending into the patterns of shadow and leaf, its breath held in perfect stillness as it listened for the nearly imperceptible rustle of prey. There was no tension in its posture, only a deep, embodied patience, a knowing that time was on its side, that the night was long, and that every movement was part of a larger, gentler rhythm. These hunters did not stalk with aggression, but with a kind of respectful curiosity, as if they understood their place in the balance of things. Their pursuit was not a violent struggle, but a quiet alignment of intention and opportunity. When they moved, it was with a grace that felt almost meditative, a slow, gliding approach, a moment of perfect stillness, then a swift, efficient strike that was over almost before it began. The aftermath was not chaos, but a return to calm, as the hunter settled to consume its meal with the same focused tranquility with which it had hunted. Around them, the night world continued its own soft symphony. Crickets chirped in the undergrowth, their songs a steady backdrop to the hunter's silent movements. Bats, early predecessors of the modern kind, flitted through the air with erratic grace, their wings whispering against the darkness. The hunters took no notice of these companions. They were part of the tapestry, not the focus. Their attention remained on the ground, the air, the subtle vibrations that spoke of life moving through the shadows. As the night deepened, the moon climbed higher, casting longer, softer shadows that seemed to embrace rather than conceal. The hunters' activities became even more subdued, their movements blending into the dreamlike quality of the hour. They were not intruders in this peace, they were its interpreters, living expressions of the night's gentle mysteries. Their existence was a reminder that predation need not be frantic or fearful, that it too could be practiced with grace, with patience, with a kind of sacred attentiveness. By the time the first hints of dawn tinged the eastern sky, the nocturnal hunters had withdrawn, melting back into the denser parts of the forest or finding sheltered roosts where they could rest through the coming day. The evidence of their passing was minimal, a few disturbed leaves, a patch of softened earth, the quiet satisfaction of hunger, met with calm efficiency. They left no mark of violence, only the subtle imprint of their presence, like a breath on glass. And as the day creatures began to stir, the night's soft dance faded into memory, a secret held by the moon and the shadows. It was a world within a world, a layer of life that asked for nothing but darkness and silence, and gave in return a lesson in how to move through the world with grace, with purpose, and with profound unspoken peace. In the gentle light of late afternoon, a herd of hadrosaurs moved slowly through a grove of ginkgos, their broad, duck-like mouths working in a steady, meditative rhythm as they browsed. The sound was not one of haste or hunger, but of deep contentment, a soft, repetitive crunching of leaves that blended with the rustle of branches and the sigh of the wind. Each bite was deliberate, almost reverent, as if the dinosaurs were not merely eating, but communing with the forest, translating the language of leaves into sustenance and serenity. Their jaws moved in a slow, side-to-side motion, grinding foliage with a sound like distant, gentle rainfall, a soothing percussion to the day's quiet melody. Around them, the air was rich with the scent of bruised greenery, a clean, slightly sweet aroma that spoke of life and growth. The hadrosaurs' movements were unhurried, their large, dark eyes soft with focus as they selected the tenderest shoots and most succulent fronds. They did not strip branches bare or ravage the plants in their path. Instead, they grazed with a kind of mindful generosity, taking only what they needed and leaving the rest to thrive. Their feeding was a dance of reciprocity, a silent agreement between consumer and consumed that had been refined over millennia into an art of peaceful coexistence. Younger members of the herd stayed close to the adults, mimicking their movements with earnest clumsiness. Their chewing was softer, less assured, but no less rhythmic, a lighter counterpoint to the deeper, more resonant crunch of the mature individuals. Occasionally, one would pause, a half-chewed leaf dangling from its mouth, as it watched a butterfly drift past, or listened to the call of a distant pterosaur. There was no scolding, no urgency to resume. The adults allowed these moments of distraction, understanding that wonder was as much a part of life as nourishment. As the sun dipped lower, casting long golden shafts of light through the canopy, the herd's feeding slowed to an even more leisurely pace. Some individuals settled onto their haunches, chewing thoughtfully as they gazed into the middle distance, their minds perhaps as calm and untroubled as their surroundings. The sound of their jaws became a lulling, almost hypnotic rhythm, a natural metronome marking the passage of time not in minutes but in mouthfuls. It was a sound that invited stillness in the listener, a vibration that seemed to harmonize with the heartbeat of the earth itself. In this tranquil setting, the act of eating was stripped of any sense of urgency or scarcity. It was a ritual of abundance, a daily practice of gratitude performed in the dappled light of the forest. The hadrosaurs were not merely consuming, they were participating in the cycle of life with a grace and gentleness that felt almost sacred. Their peaceful browsing was a reminder that sustenance could be taken without violence, that fullness could be achieved without rush, and that even the simplest of actions like chewing a leaf could become a meditation if done with presence and peace. And as the evening settled in, the herd gradually stilled, their hunger satisfied, their bodies content. They rested where they were, some lying down, others remaining upright, their breath slow and deep, the last of the daylight caught in their eyes, which now held the soft, distant look of creatures fully at ease. The forest, too, seemed to sigh in satisfaction, its offerings accepted with respect, its balance undisturbed. In the growing twilight, the memory of the chewing rhythm lingered like a gentle echo, a language of leaves spoken and understood, a conversation between life and life that needed no words, only peace. The first rays of dawn crept across the Cretaceous landscape like a slow golden tide, warming the cool earth and stirring the cold-blooded inhabitants from their nightly torpor. On a broad, sun-baked slab of stone, a group of ankylosaurs lay in a scattered, contented heap, their armored bodies arranged to catch the maximum amount of the morning's gentle heat. Their plates and knobs, which in shadow seemed like formidable defenses, now glowed with a soft, welcoming warmth, each ridge and osteoderm absorbing the sunlight like miniature solar panels. There was no movement among them yet, only a collective, deep-boned stillness as they soaked in the life-giving rays, their metabolisms gradually awakening from the chill of the night. Smaller creatures, too, sought out their own patches of light. A lone stegosaur settled onto a sun-drenched incline, its plates angled perfectly to catch the sun's angle, while along a fallen log, a series of smaller basking dinosaurs, perhaps early relatives of iguanas or smaller ornithischians, arranged themselves in silent communion, their bodies pressed against the warming wood. Their eyes were half closed, not in sleep, but in a state of meditative absorption, their entire beings focused on the simple vital act of thermoregulation. It was a ritual without rush, a daily rebirth performed in utter tranquility. The air itself seemed to thicken with the growing warmth, carrying the scent of sun-heated stone and dry vegetation. As the light intensified, the basking creatures began to show subtle signs of reanimation, a slow blink, a slight shift in position to expose a different angle to the sun, the faintest twitch of a tail. But there was no urgency in these movements, only a languid, deliberate adjustment to optimize comfort. Time held no meaning here beyond the gradual climb of the sun and the corresponding rise of internal heat. This was a world governed by patience, by the deep, ancient understanding that some things cannot be hurried, especially the waking of cold blood. From a distance, the scene was one of profound peace. The dinosaurs lay like sculptures placed by a thoughtful hand, their forms softened by the growing light, their shadows stretching long and distorted across the ground. The only sound was the occasional creak of a warming scale or the soft exhalation of a creature sinking deeper into contentment. They were not merely waiting for the day to begin, they were participating in its very arrival, their bodies serving as conduits between the sun and the earth, between energy and life. And as the sun climbed higher, washing the world in a clear, brilliant light, the basking dinosaurs seemed to glow from within, their stillness radiating a quiet joy. This was not the frantic energy of a hunt or the nervous vigilance of prey. It was the pure, undiluted pleasure of warmth after cold, of light after darkness. It was a reminder that life, in its most essential form, is often about these simple sensory satisfactions, the feel of the sun on one's back, the slow return of feeling to dormant limbs, the deep animal knowledge that for this moment, in this patch of sunlight, all is exactly as it should be. As the sun climbed higher, its warmth became a shared currency among the smaller, more social dinosaurs. In a sheltered clearing where the light fell unfiltered, a group of ornithomimids had settled together, their slender bodies arranged in a loose circle like the petals of a sun-seeking flower. They pressed close, not out of fear or urgency, but for the simple, profound comfort of shared heat. Their feathered forms created a living blanket, trapping the sun's energy between them and radiating it back in a gentle, communal exchange. There was no jostling for position, no tension in their proximity, only a quiet, mutual understanding that warmth was better when given and received together. The young nestled at the center, curled against the flanks of the adults, their downy feathers fluffed to maximize the collective heat. Their eyes were soft with sleepiness, their breathing slow and even, as they drifted in and out of dozes, soothed by the steady heartbeat rhythms of the larger bodies around them. Occasionally, an adult would shift slightly, adjusting its position to better shield a hatchling from a stray breeze or to expose a new patch of skin to the sun's rays. These movements were slow, deliberate, almost ceremonial, a silent language of care written in warmth and touch. Beyond the circle, other species engaged in similar rituals. A family of protoceratops basked on a sun-warmed slope, the adults lying on their sides with their legs tucked comfortably, while the youngsters clambered over them in a gentle game that was as much about contact as it was about play. Their beaks occasionally nudged one another in soft, reaffirming gestures, and the low, contented rumble that vibrated through the group was less a sound than a feeling, a hum of satisfaction that seemed to rise from the earth itself. Even the air in these gathering places felt different, thicker, softer, imbued with the scent of sun-heated feathers and dry earth. Dragonflies, drawn by the warmth, hovered and dipped around the resting dinosaurs, their iridescent wings catching the light in fleeting rainbows that no one seemed to notice but that added to the scene's dreamlike quality. Time slowed here, measured not in minutes but in the gradual shift of shadows and the deepening sense of collective peace. There was a profound sense of safety in these sunlit congregations. Predators were less likely to approach a group radiating such calm unity, and the shared vigilance of many eyes allowed each individual to relax more fully than they could alone. But it was more than mere practicality. It was a choice, a preference for togetherness, for the soft reassurance of presence. These creatures did not cluster solely for survival. They did it for comfort, for the simple joy of feeling the sun together, of existing in a state of shared wordless contentment. As the morning wore on, the heat became a palpable force, a golden embrace that held them all in its tranquil grip. Some of the dinosaurs began to drowse in earnest, their heads nodding, their bodies sinking deeper into the warm earth. Others remained awake but motionless, their eyes half closed, watching the world through a soft, sun-dazed haze. The boundary between individual beings seemed to blur in the collective warmth, creating a single breathing entity of peace and comfort. And in that moment, under the generous sun, there was nothing lacking, nothing wanting. The world was reduced to its simplest, kindest elements: light, warmth, and the gentle press of life against life. It was a portrait of communal harmony, a silent testament to the fact that even in an ancient, wild world, there was room for softness, for sharing, for the quiet, radiant joy of being together in the light. In the quiet interplay of life that defined the Cretaceous, every creature was a thread in a vast, living tapestry. Each movement, each breath, each moment of stillness, part of an intricate balance that hummed with unspoken harmony. The great herbivores, in their gentle browsing, did not merely consume vegetation, they pruned and shaped the forests, encouraging new growth and creating clearings where sunlight could nurture younger plants. Their massive footprints became temporary ponds after rains, offering drinking holes for smaller animals and breeding grounds for insects. In their immense peaceful passage, they were unknowing gardeners, tending to the world even as they fed upon it. Predators, too, had their place in this delicate web. Their hunts were not acts of disruption, but of refinement, culling the weak and the sick, ensuring herds remained strong and agile, preventing overgrazing in vulnerable areas. Otrodun's successful strike was not an end but a transfer of energy, a returning of nutrients to the soil that would eventually feed the plants that fed the herbivores. Death here was not a violent rupture, but a quiet closing of one circle and the opening of another, a seamless transition woven into the fabric of life with a grace that belied its necessity. Even the smallest beings played their part. Insects pollinated primitive flowers, their buzzing a soft undercurrent to the forest's silence. Tiny mammals scattered seeds in their foraging, helping to spread flora across the landscape. Decomposers, fungi, bacteria, unnoticed invertebrates, worked in the dark and the damp, breaking down what had fallen and returning it to the earth, completing the cycle with silent, relentless efficiency. Nothing was wasted, nothing was without purpose. The world was a closed loop of giving and receiving, a dance of mutual support that required no oversight, only participation. The air itself was part of this exchange, the great sauropods' exhalations adding warmth and moisture to the atmosphere, their inhalations drawing in the oxygen produced by the plants they consumed. The very weather seemed to respond to the rhythms of life, rains following migrations, dry spells encouraging movement, seasons shifting in a slow, responsive dialogue with the beings that lived through them. It was a world in conversation with itself, each element listening and replying in a language of growth, decay, and renewal. To imagine this interconnectedness was to feel a deep, abiding sense of peace. There were no true strangers here, no isolated existences. A hadrosaur's contented chewing was linked to the fern's unfurling frond, which was linked to the beetle scurrying beneath it, which was linked to the small theropod that might hunt it at dusk. Life was a series of gentle handoffs, a continuous flow of energy and care that moved through the world like a slow, deep breath. And in that flow, there was a profound reassurance, a sense that every being, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant, was held, was necessary, was loved by the very systems that sustained it. The Cretaceous was not a world of solitary struggles, but of collective thriving, a masterpiece of balance achieved not through competition, but through cooperation written into the code of life itself. To drift through this ancient ecosystem in the mind's eye was to remember what it feels like to be part of something whole, something generous, something endlessly giving, a reminder that we too are threads in a tapestry much larger than ourselves, woven into a design of beautiful unseen connections. The first drops fell slowly, fat and heavy, striking the broad leaves of cycads and ferns with soft, percussive taps that echoed through the otherwise silent forest. Then, as if the sky had taken a deeper breath, the rain began in earnest, a steady, gentle shower that washed the world in a veil of silver and gray. It was not a storm, not a violent deluge, but a soft, persistent fall that seemed to hush the very air, muffling distant sounds and drawing a curtain of tranquility over the Cretaceous landscape. On the backs of sleeping giants, the raindrops beaded and rolled like liquid mercury, tracing the contours of scale and muscle before dripping to the already damp earth below. The sauropods, roused only slightly from their slumber, seemed to lean into the rainfall, their massive bodies accepting the water with a kind of grateful stillness. Steam rose faintly from their warm hides where the cooler rain touched them, creating a soft mist that clung to their forms like a second skin. They did not seek shelter or shake the water away. Instead, they remained as they were, their breathing slow and deep, as if the rain were a natural part of their rest, a lullaby written in droplets, a rhythm as ancient as their own hearts. Their eyes, half-lidded and peaceful, watched the world through a curtain of water, seeing nothing and everything at once. Smaller creatures took refuge under the broad canopied trees, or within thickets of fern, but even there the sound of the rain dominated, a soft, constant patter on leaves above, a trickle through fronds, the occasional plink as a gathered droplet fell from a leaf tip to the forest floor. The world seemed to shrink to the size of this sound, this gentle, enveloping whisper that blurred edges and softened outlines. Colors deepened under the wetness. Greens became richer, browns more earthy. The gray of stone took on a polished sheen. Everything felt closer, more intimate, wrapped in the shared experience of the rain. Along the riverbanks, the water began to rise, not with violence, but with a slow, inevitable grace. The current carried leaves and twigs in a leisurely procession, and the rain-dimpled surface of the water reflected the gray sky in 1,000 shifting ripples. A Spinosaurus, standing patient and still at the water's edge, seemed not to notice the rain at all. Its sail glistened with moisture, and its gaze remained fixed on the depths below, as if the falling water was simply part of the river itself. Its stillness in the midst of the shower was a lesson in acceptance, a demonstration that some things need not be resisted, only experienced. As the rain continued, a deep, earthy scent rose from the ground, the smell of wet soil, crushed vegetation, and petrichor, as familiar in that ancient world as it is in ours. It was a fragrance of renewal, of cleansing, of quiet abundance. The forest seemed to drink deeply, its roots soaking up the moisture, its leaves shaking gently under the weight of the water. There was no hurry for the rain to stop, no impatience for the sun to return. This was a moment to be felt, not rushed, a sensory immersion in the simple, soothing act of falling water. And when the rain finally began to ease, fading from a steady shower to a drizzle, then to nothing more than the occasional drip from leaves, the world did not burst back into noise. Instead, it remained hushed, wrapped in the aftermath of the shower, a world washed clean, softened, and ready for dreams. The dinosaurs, great and small, settled more deeply into their rest, their forms glistening in the returning moonlight. The rain had not disturbed them, it had only deepened their peace, reminding them, and any who might imagine them, that sometimes the kindest sound is the one that asks for nothing but listening, the one that hushes the world to sleep. In the soft lavender light of twilight, the world held its breath to witness one of its oldest and gentlest rituals. Across a clearing where the day's last warmth still lingered in the earth, a pair of crested hadrosaurs began their courtship dance, a silent, graceful ballet of ancient affection performed under a sky slowly filling with stars. The male stepped forward, not with aggression, but with a tender deliberateness, his head lowered in a gesture of offering rather than challenge. His crest, normally a simple curve against the sky, now seemed to catch the fading light in a soft, iridescent shimmer, each movement causing the colors to shift like liquid pearl. He swayed slowly from side to side, his entire body moving in a rhythm that felt less like display and more like invitation, a wordless poem written in motion and light. The female watched, her dark eyes reflecting the same twilight, her own body still but deeply attentive. She did not retreat or tense. Instead, she seemed to soften, her breathing syncing with the slow, rhythmic pulses of his display. Around them, the air hummed with the faint, melodic calls of other creatures beginning their evening songs. But these two existed in a bubble of shared silence, their communication happening in the space between breaths, in the subtle language of shifted weight and tilted heads. His feathers rustled softly as he moved, a sound like distant whispers, each rustle a gentle punctuation in their silent conversation. He extended one feathered arm, not to grasp or claim, but to trace an arc in the air between them, a gesture of reverence, of patience. The delicate filaments of his plumage caught the last of the light, glowing with a soft internal radiance that seemed to deepen as the sky darkened. His dance was not a performance of dominance, but one of vulnerability, an offering of his most beautiful self in the hope of being accepted. There was no hurry in his movements, no desperation, only the deep ancient knowing that some things cannot be rushed, especially the slow unfurling of trust. The female took a step forward, then another, her movements mirroring his now in a delicate, responsive echo. She dipped her head, not in submission, but in acknowledgement, a silent yes that needed no sound. Their crests nearly touched, not in collision, but in a gentle, almost hesitant brush that sent a shiver through both their forms. Around them, fireflies began to awaken, their tiny lights flickering like scattered stars, adding their own soft punctuation to the scene. The world seemed to hold still for this moment, this ancient dance of finding and being found. As darkness settled fully, their movements slowed, gentled, until they were simply standing together, their sides pressed close, their breathing synchronized. The dance was over, but its meaning lingered in the warmth between them, in the soft nuzzle of crest against crest, in the way their shadows merged into one on the moonlit grass. They had not won or conquered, they had simply met, in the softest way possible, and chosen to stay. And under the rising moon they stood together, a living testament to the fact that love, in all its forms, is the oldest language of all. It needs no words, no grand gestures, only the courage to be soft, to be still, to offer one's most tender self and wait, with infinite patience for the world to answer in kind. The twilight deepened around them, the stars brightened above, and in that quiet clearing, two dinosaurs rested against each other, their hearts beating in a rhythm that was both ancient and entirely new, a dance that had begun millions of years ago and would continue in its gentle way forever. The end did not come with a roar, but with a long, slow exhale, a gentle fading, like the final notes of a distant melody lingering in the air long after the music has ceased. One era drifted into the next, not with violence or abrupt finality, but with a quiet, almost tender resignation, as if the world itself were settling into a deep and dreamless sleep. The great dinosaurs, those magnificent beings who had moved through the Cretaceous with such grace and presence, did not vanish in an instant of cataclysm, but rather receded, their numbers thinning like mist under a softening sun, their absence felt first as a subtle quietness, then as a growing stillness where once there had been life. In this imagined gentle decline, there was no panic, no desperate struggle, only a gradual yielding to forces larger than any single species. The herds grew smaller, their migrations shorter, their calls fewer and farther between. The forests, once vibrant with the rustle of countless lives, grew quieter, the spaces between sounds stretching longer, until the silence itself became a presence. It was not an emptiness, but a fullness of quiet, a world pausing, breathing out, releasing its hold on one form of life to make room for another. The dinosaurs, in their wisdom or their innocence, seemed to accept this change not as an end, but as a transition, a returning. Their final days were not marked by suffering, but by a deep, pervasive calm. The great sauropods stood for the last time under familiar constellations, their immense forms outlined against starry skies that would outlast them. They browsed on cycad fronds in the soft light of dawn, drank from rivers that would soon forget their footfalls, and rested in the warmth of a sun that would continue to rise long after they were gone. There was a dignity in their departure, a sense that they were not defeated, but simply completed, their time fulfilled, their purpose served in the great slow turning of the earth. Smaller creatures, too, felt the change. A thinning of their numbers, a quieting of their calls, a gradual stilling of the forests they had called home. Nests were built that would never be used again, migrations begun that would not be finished, courtship dances performed for partners who would not return. Yet there was no sorrow in these acts, only the enduring rhythm of instinct, playing out its patterns even as the audience faded away. Life continued, but softly, like a story being told in ever quieter tones, until the words were barely whispers on the wind. The air itself seemed to hold the memory of them, the warmth of their bodies, the sound of their breathing, the gentle vibration of their footfalls. Long after the last had gone, the world felt different, not emptier, but quieter, as if a great, gentle presence had withdrawn, leaving behind an echo of peace. The ferns still grew, the rivers still flowed, the stars still shone, but they did so in a world that had been softened by the passing of giants, a world that remembered without mourning, that changed without erasing. To ponder this gentle extinction was to understand that endings need not be violent to be profound. Some doors close without a sound, some lights dim without a flicker, and some eras conclude not with a crash but with a sigh. The dinosaurs did not leave scars, they left spaces, quiet places in the rock, in the soil, in the imagination, where their memory could rest undisturbed, like fossils waiting to be dreamed rather than discovered. Their departure was not a tragedy, but a tender release, a returning of borrowed energy to the universe from which it came. And in that release there was a deep, abiding peace, a sense that all things, no matter how grand, have their season, and that the close of a season is not a failure, but a completion. The mystery of their extinction was not a puzzle to be solved, but a meditation to be felt, a reminder that even the end of a world can be gentle, can be quiet, can be in its own way beautiful. The silence, when it finally settled, was not an emptiness but a presence, a soft, velvety quiet that draped over the world like a blanket woven from memory and time. The last great sauropod had breathed its final, slow exhalation days or perhaps weeks before, and now the forest stood in a state of profound stillness, as if the very trees were listening for a rhythm that would not return. The ferns no longer trembled under the footfalls of giants, the rivers reflected only sky and cloud, undisturbed by the gentle drinking of hadrosaurs or the patient waiting of spinosaurs. It was a world returned to its own breath, its own heartbeat, its own deep and dreaming core. In this new quiet, smaller life began to stir with a tentative softness. Mammals, once hidden in the shadows of behemoths, ventured out into the open, their small, bright eyes taking in a world that felt both familiar and utterly changed. They did not rush or claim the space with noise, they moved with a kind of reverent curiosity, as if aware that they were stepping into a story that had ended, yet somehow was also just beginning. Their tiny footfalls were whispers on the leaf litter, their soft chirps and rustles a new language for a world learning to speak again. The air itself seemed cleaner, lighter, as if a great weight had been lifted, not a burden, but a presence that had completed its purpose. Sunlight fell unfiltered through canopies that no longer shook with the movement of titans, illuminating clearings where young plants sprouted with renewed vigor, freed from the constant browsing of immense mouths. Flowers bloomed in colors no dinosaur eye would ever see, their petals soft and bright in the gentle light, offering nectar to insects that hummed with a quiet industry. It was a world not of loss but of space, space for new dreams, new forms, new ways of being. Seasons continued their turn, indifferent to the change, yet somehow softer in their passage. Rains fell and nourished the soil where bones now rested. Winds whispered through branches that once brushed against scaled hides. Snows dusted landscapes that had known the warmth of great bodies. Time did not stop or stumble. It simply flowed forward, carrying the memory of what had been like a leaf carried on a slow river, present but not obstructing the current. The planet itself seemed to sigh, a long, slow release of one era so that another might breathe. And in that sigh there was peace. The dinosaurs had not left behind a scarred or broken world, but one that felt complete, as if their story had reached its natural, gentle conclusion. Their absence was not a void, but a quiet invitation, a clearing in the forest of time where new life could take root, new songs could be sung, new wonders could unfold. They had made space, not through violence or struggle, but through a graceful yielding, a final act of generosity to the future. To imagine this peaceful close was to feel not sorrow, but a deep swelling gratitude for the beauty that had been, for the silence that remained, for the endless cycle of giving and receiving that defines life itself. The Cretaceous had been a grand, gentle dream, and its ending was not a waking, but a drifting into a different kind of sleep, one where the dreamers changed, but the dreaming continued. Under the same stars the dinosaurs had known, new eyes would look up and wonder, new hearts would beat in time with the earth, new stories would be told, and in the soft everlasting dark, the memory of giants would linger like a lullaby, a whisper of warmth, a breath of wonder, a peaceful close to a grand story, making space for new dreams. In the deep, dark quiet where stone holds memory, the great skeletons rest, not as monuments to loss, but as gentle guardians of a world that once was. They lie encased in sedimentary embrace, their forms softened by the patient pressure of millennia, their bones transformed into stone that hums with the echo of ancient life. To imagine them there, in that perpetual twilight beneath the earth, is to feel not the chill of death, but the warmth of a long, tranquil sleep. They are not gone, they are dreaming, their secrets held close like whispered lullabies meant only for the earth itself to hear. Each fossil is a story paused mid-breath, a moment captured not in amber, but in stone, preserved with a tenderness that time alone could provide. The curve of a hadrosaur's beak, the delicate arch of a raptor's claw, the immense hollow bones of a sauropod, all rest in perfect stillness, as if waiting not for discovery, but for the right moment to continue their dream. They do not yearn for the sun or the air. They are content in their stony beds, wrapped in layers of shale and sandstone like blankets woven from the earth's own patience. Their sleep is deep undisturbed, a rest earned by eons of graceful existence. And what dreams might they dream, these stone-held giants? Perhaps they wander still through forests of memory, their footfalls silent on forgotten fern beds, their calls echoing in canyons that exist now only in the mind of the planet. They breathe not air but time, they feed not on leaves but on the quiet satisfaction of having been. Their rest is not an end but a translation, a moving from the world of motion to the world of memory, where everything is soft, everything is slow, everything is safe. To hold a fossil in the hand is not to hold a relic of death, but a touchstone to that deep and tranquil sleep. The cool weight of it, the smoothness worn by ages, the faint impression of life that lingers in the stone, all speak of a peace so profound it transcends time. It is a lullaby in solid form, a rhythm felt in the pulse of the rock, a whisper that says, "Rest, all is well, the world remembers you." The fossil does not speak of extinction, but of eternity, not of absence but of presence, shifted, softened, sanctified by sleep. And in the stillness of museums, or the silence of dig sites, these stone dreams continue. They do not demand attention or interpretation, they simply are, resting in their cases and strata like children in deep slumber, their faces smooth with the peace of untroubled dreams. They ask for nothing but to be left to their rest, to their slow, sure transformation from bone to stone to memory. They are the earth's own children, and she sings them to sleep with the patience of mountains, the constancy of rivers, the softness of settling dust. To think of them this way is to understand that nothing is ever truly lost. Life changes form, but it does not vanish. It settles, like sediment, into new layers of being. The dinosaurs are not extinct, they are sleeping, their stories folded into the stone, their breaths become the very air we breathe, their heart beats the steady pulse of the planet's core. They are with us still, not as ghosts but as lullabies, soft, steady and endless, sung by the earth to herself in the deep of the night, a reminder that even the grandest stories end in peace, in rest, in the gentle holding of all that was and all that will be. Above the silent, slumbering world of the Cretaceous, the stars burned with a cold, clear brilliance, their ancient light falling upon the land like a gentle silver rain. These were the same constellations that had witnessed the rise and fall of mountains, the slow drift of continents, and the quiet breathing of giants unchanging, eternal sentinels in the velvet dark. A sleeping triceratops, its frill tipped with moon glow, might have seen the same patterns we trace today, the same bear, the same hunter, the same river of light spilling across the heavens. In that shared sky, across an abyss of millions of years, a connection hummed, soft, serene, and endlessly deep. The air, free of artificial light or industrial haze, offered a clarity that modern eyes can scarcely imagine. The Milky Way was not a faint smudge but a blazing highway of diamonds, so vivid and close it seemed one could wade into its currents. Meteors streaked with silent frequency, their brief lives writing vanishing poems against the black. To stand under that sky was to feel both infinitesimally small and profoundly connected, a single breath in the cosmic night, yet part of a continuity that stretched backward and forward through time. The dinosaurs knew this sky not as a thing to be studied, but as a presence to be lived under, a nightly blanket of wonder. In the soft focus of half-sleep, a hadrosaur might have lifted its head, its large dark eyes reflecting star upon star, each twinkle a tiny echo of the vastness above. It did not understand constellations or galaxies, but it felt the calm they offered, the steady silent reassurance that the world was ordered, was beautiful, was held in an embrace larger than any single life. The cool night air carried the scent of damp earth and cycads, but also something else, the clean, almost metallic scent of starlight, a fragrance of distance and peace. The longer one gazed, the more the boundary between earth and sky seemed to soften. The dinosaurs became not just creatures under the stars, but part of the cosmos itself, their breathing syncing with the slow pulse of the universe, their heartbeats keeping time with the rhythm of spinning galaxies. Their immense bodies, grounded in soil and stone, were nevertheless touched by that ancient light, connected to the void not by fear, but by a quiet celestial kinship. They were earthly and cosmic simultaneously, rooted and star-dusted, finite and eternal. As the night deepened, the stars seemed to intensify, their light deepening the shadows between ferns and around sleeping forms. Yet there was no darkness here, only a different kind of illumination, softer, more generous, without sharp edges or harsh contrasts. It was a light that revealed not details, but essences, the curve of a sauropod's neck, the sweep of a pterosaur's wing, the gentle rise and fall of a scaled flank. Everything was simplified, softened, sanctified by starlight. And in that simplification, there was peace. The worries of the day, the struggles for food, the watchfulness for predators, all faded under the steady gaze of the stars. There was only the now, the here, the vast and gentle night. The dinosaurs slept under that eternal watch, their dreams perhaps filled with silent, star-drenched landscapes, with migrations along the Milky Way, with nests built on the moon. They did not need to name the stars to know their comfort, they only needed to rest beneath them, to be part of the long, unbroken chain of life that had looked up and felt wonder. To imagine them there, under those same stars we know today, is to feel a bridge across time, not of steel or stone, but of light. It is a connection that requires no words, no proof, only a willingness to look up and share the same sky, to feel the same awe, to be comforted by the same endless, gentle dark. The stars do not care about epochs or extinctions, they simply shine, offering their cold fire to all who dare to gaze, then and now, binding us all in a silent, serene fellowship of wonder. Beneath the restless surface of life, the planet itself breathed a slow, rhythmic expansion and contraction, felt not in days or seasons but in epochs. Continents drifted like sleeping leviathans on a molten sea, their movements measured in centimeters per year, a stately dance of rock and fire that rearranged the world with infinite patience. Oceans widened, mountains rose and wore down to soft hills, and climates shifted like moods across the face of the globe, all part of a deep planetary respiration that hummed beneath the feet of dinosaurs and the roots of forests. This was the Earth's true heartbeat, a pulse so gradual it was imperceptible to any living thing, yet it set the tempo for all existence. In the late Cretaceous, this breath was a warm, moist exhalation, a world largely without polar ice, where lush forests stretched into high latitudes and shallow seas sprawled across continental interiors. The air itself felt thicker, richer, heavy with oxygen, and the scent of growing things, a blanket of vitality wrapped around the spinning globe. Seasons were gentle, transitions soft, as if the planet itself were in a state of tranquil abundance, breathing out life in every direction. The dinosaurs, in their immense diversity and grace, were not merely inhabitants of this world, they were expressions of its breath, living manifestations of its slow, generous exhale. One could almost feel the land itself shifting, if one had the patience to wait millions of years. A river that once flowed east might gradually be captured by a stream cutting back from the west, its waters diverted to a new ocean over millennia. A coastline might advance or retreat as sea levels subtly changed, not with sudden floods but with the languid pace of water finding its level across geologic time. Even the composition of the air was in flux, oxygen levels slightly higher, carbon dioxide weaving through the atmosphere in different concentrations, all part of the planet's long, slow exchange with the life it sustained. This deep rhythm was the context for everything. The migrations of herds, the distribution of forests, the very shape of evolution itself. Species adapted not to abrupt changes, but to gradual trends, their forms refining over generations in response to a world that was always almost imperceptibly in motion. There was no urgency in this adaptation, only a seamless flowing with the planet's breath, a dance of life and land so integrated that it was impossible to say where one ended and the other began. The earth provided, and life received in a cycle of giving and receiving that felt less like survival and more like symbiosis. And through it all, the dinosaurs moved with a grace that mirrored the planet's own slow certainty. Their immense size was not a burden, but a testament to the abundance of the age, their longevity not an accident but a reflection of the stability of their world. They were children of this long, warm exhale, creatures of a time when the earth held its breath in a sustained moment of generosity. Their footsteps, though temporary, were part of the sediment that would one day become stone, their bodies part of the carbon that would fuel future life, their existence woven into the very fabric of the planet's breathing. To imagine this deep time rhythm was to feel a profound calm. The anxieties of moments and hours faded against the backdrop of millions of years. The rise and fall of species, the shifting of continents, the slow dance of climate, all were part of a larger, gentler pattern, a breath so deep it made room for everything: life, death, change, and continuity. The earth was not a static stage, but a living, breathing participant in the story of life, and its breath was the soundtrack to that story, a low, resonant hum that underlay all other sounds, all other silences. And in that hum, there was peace. The planet would breathe on, through extinctions and renewals, through ice ages and warm spells, through the coming of new forms and the passing of old. The dinosaurs, in their time, had ridden the crest of a long, warm exhale, and when their time was done, the earth would inhale again, preparing, always, for the next gift of life. But for now, in the soft, star-dusted Cretaceous night, the breath was out, the world was warm, and all was held in the gentle, rhythmic embrace of a planet that knew exactly how to take its time. In the soft, dappled light of the late Cretaceous forest, a lone Troodon paused at the edge of a shallow stream, its head tilted in a posture of deep contemplation. Its large, forward-facing eyes, keen and perceptive, scanned the water's surface, not with predatory urgency, but with a calm, analytical curiosity. This was not merely instinct at work, it was a mind in quiet motion, weighing options, considering currents, and solving the gentle puzzle of how to cross without startling the small silver fish that darted just beneath the surface. The dinosaur's feathered arms remained still at its sides, its entire body a study in focused patience, as if it understood that some problems are best approached with stillness rather than speed. Nearby, a small herd of hadrosaurs moved through a clearing, their communication unfolding in a language of subtlety and nuance. A soft, low rumble from one individual caused the others to adjust their path almost imperceptibly, not in alarm, but in coordinated harmony. There was no visible signal, no dramatic gesture, only a shared understanding that seemed to flow between them like an invisible current. Their social bonds were not forged in conflict or competition, but in the daily, gentle acts of mutual awareness, a nudge to guide a straying juvenile, a shifted position to allow a companion better access to tender shoots, a synchronized pause to listen to a distant sound. This was intelligence expressed not as dominance but as care. In the high branches of a ginkgo tree, a small bird-like dinosaur wove strands of moss and fern into an intricate nest, its movements deliberate and precise. It tested the strength of each placement, adjusted for balance, and even incorporated a stray feather that had caught on a nearby branch. The construction was not mere repetition of instinctual behavior, but a creative act, a solving of the unique challenges presented by this particular tree, this particular season. The dinosaur's dark eyes reflected a quiet satisfaction as it stepped back to assess its work, a moment of contemplation that felt deeply familiar, a recognition of a task well done. The problem-solving of these ancient beings often unfolded in such soft, unhurried ways. A lost member of a herd did not panic, but paused, lifting its head to taste the air and listen for the familiar low frequencies of its family, then moving with deliberate calm in the direction of the sound. A predator, thwarted by a clever hiding place of its prey, did not lash out in frustration, but sat back on its haunches, reassessing the situation with a patience that spoke of a mind capable of learning, of adapting, of trying again with a new approach. Their intelligence was not measured in sudden flashes of insight, but in the steady, gentle accumulation of experience, a deep knowing of their world earned through attentive living. One could imagine the rich inner lives that accompanied these outward displays of cognition, memories of migration routes etched into neural pathways, the recognition of individual faces within a herd, the anticipation of seasonal changes in food sources, the complex emotional landscape of social bonds, all unfolding in minds that, while different from our own, were no less vibrant, no less capable of wonder and connection. Their thoughts may not have been framed in words, but in sensations, images, and rhythms, the feel of a familiar trail underfoot, the sight of a trusted companion, the sound of a rain shower approaching, the warmth of the sun on a cold morning. There was no judgment in this intelligence, no hierarchy of smart or simple. Each species, each individual, possessed its own unique way of knowing the world, the Spinosaurus's profound patience, the Hadrosaur's social synergy, the Troodon's curious problem-solving. All were valid, all were beautiful in their own right. Their cognitive world was not a ladder to be climbed, but a garden to be wandered, each mind a different flower blooming in its own time and its own way. To ponder the quiet intelligence of dinosaurs was to embrace a sense of deep, empathetic wonder. It was to imagine them not as primitive automatons, but as conscious beings experiencing their world with a fullness and a presence that we can only gently speculate upon. They were thinkers, feelers, learners, beings who knew their world not through abstraction, but through direct sensory engagement, through the slow, patient integration of experience into understanding, and in that understanding there was a profound peace. Their intelligence was not a weapon, but a tool for harmony, a way of navigating the world with grace, with care, with a deep and abiding connection to the life around them. They did not seek to conquer their environment, but to know it, to belong to it, to move through it with a quiet wisdom that respected the balance of all things. Their minds, like their bodies, were gifts of evolution, honed not for domination, but for integration, a gentle, enduring testament to the fact that true intelligence is not about being above the world, but about being deeply, peacefully, and wonderfully within it. In the quiet spaces between knowing, where facts fade into the soft haze of imagination, there lies a gentle gift, the profound peace of not needing to know. The Cretaceous world, for all its vividness in the mind's eye, remains ultimately unknowable, a tapestry woven with threads of mystery that no amount of digging or deduction can fully unravel. And in that uncertainty there is no anxiety, only an expansive freedom, a permission to wonder, to dream, to rest in the soft embrace of what might have been, rather than straining for the brittle certainty of what was. It is a space where curiosity floats without anchor, where questions are not puzzles to be solved, but gentle companions for a wandering mind. One could spend a lifetime studying the fossilized remains of these ancient beings, measuring bone structures, analyzing sediment layers, and constructing intricate theories about their lives. Yet for all that effort, the essence of their existence, the feel of warm scales under a midday sun, the sound of a mother's low rumble to her young, the texture of dawn mist in a conifer forest, remains forever beyond reach, locked in a past that no science can fully resurrect. And rather than a frustration, this becomes a kind of solace. The gaps in knowledge are not voids to be filled, but sanctuaries to be inhabited, quiet rooms in the mansion of the mind, where imagination can stretch out and rest, unburdened by the need for proof. In this gentle uncertainty, the dinosaurs become more than historical figures. They become possibilities. They are not fixed in a single rigid reality, but float in a soft, malleable past that can be shaped by the needs of the present moment. In one imagining, a stegosaurus's plates flush with vibrant color during a rain shower. In another, a lone allosaurus sings a soft melodic call to the moon. None of these visions can be disproven, for they live in the land of what-ifs, a territory where poetry holds as much weight as paleontology. This is not a rejection of science, but an expansion of it, a recognition that some truths are felt rather than measured, and that wonder is its own form of understanding. The mind, when released from the duty of certainty, begins to relax into a softer, more generous state. It no longer seeks to categorize or label, but simply to experience, to feel the imagined warmth of a sauropod's side, to hear the rustle of feathered limbs in a Jurassic breeze, to watch the slow blink of a triceratops in the deepening twilight. These are not lesser experiences for being imagined. They are, in their way, more intimate, more personal, more healing. They invite not analysis but immersion, a sinking into the sensory richness of a world that exists just beyond the edge of fact in the peaceful, fertile fields of maybe. And in that immersion, there is a deep and abiding rest. The constant modern urge to know, to explain, to control falls away, replaced by a tranquil acceptance of mystery. The dinosaurs become not subjects to be understood, but presences to be felt, gentle giants in the shadows of the mind, offering a lesson in how to be comfortable with not knowing. Their world, forever just out of reach, becomes a mirror for our own relationship with the unknown, reminding us that some of the most beautiful things in life are those that can never be fully grasped, only gently held in wonder. So let the questions remain unanswered. Let the mysteries stay mysterious, for in that soft space of uncertainty, the imagination finds its wings, and the soul finds its rest. The gift is not in solving the puzzle, but in enjoying the quiet beauty of its pieces, scattered, shimmering, and forever inviting the mind to dream, to wander, and to be at peace with all that it cannot, and need not, ever know. The mind, after its long and wandering journey through the vibrant, breathing world of the Cretaceous, begins at last to still. The questions that once buzzed like gentle insects, the colors, the sounds, the heartbeats, the migrations, now settle one by one, their soft hum fading into a deeper, more encompassing quiet. There is no need to seek answers here, in this hushed space at the edge of sleep. The mysteries themselves have become a kind of solace, a soft fabric of wonder in which to wrap the weary thoughts. To simply be present in this ancient world, without the urge to understand or dissect, is to return to a primal state of peace, a silent communion with a past that asks for nothing but attention, soft and open as the night itself. The imagined landscapes, once so vividly detailed, now blur at the edges, blending into a gentle impression of warmth and shadow. The great sauropods are no longer distinct forms but suggestions of immense sleeping presences. The rustle of ferns becomes a universal whisper. The scent of damp earth and cycads merges into a single soothing fragrance of deep time. It is as if the mind is lowering a veil, not to obscure but to soften, to allow the essence of the Cretaceous to seep in without the interference of analysis, to be felt rather than known. This is not a loss of clarity, but a gain of depth, a sinking into the pure sensation of a world that exists beyond words, beyond facts, beyond time. In this softening, the boundaries between then and now, between self and other, begin to dissolve. The breath of the dreamer sinks with the imagined breath of sleeping giants. The heartbeat in the chest echoes the slow, steady pulse of the planet's own rhythm. There is no separation here, only a gentle merging, a recognition that the peace of that ancient world is not confined to the past, but is a quality always available, always waiting beneath the noise of daily life. To return to silence is to remember this, to touch the eternal quiet that underlies all things, the deep abiding stillness that holds both dinosaurs and dreamers in its tender, timeless embrace. And so the mind settles, like sediment in a still pool, each thought drifting down to rest upon the soft bottom of awareness. The need to know, to name, to categorize, is released like a leaf carried away on a slow current. What remains is simply being, a wordless open presence in the hushed world of the past, where nothing is required, nothing is missing, and everything is already perfectly at peace. The silence is not empty, it is full, full of memory, full of wonder, full of a gentle, radiant darkness that welcomes the weary soul home. The silence deepened, folding in upon itself like a flower closing at dusk, until there was no distinction between the imagined world and the dreaming mind. The great forms of dinosaurs melted into the soft fabric of the subconscious, their outlines blurring into gentle impressions of warmth and weight, like stone smoothed by a river's patient flow. The rustle of ancient leaves became the rhythm of the sleeper's breath. The distant call of a hadrosaur softened into the faint sigh of wind against the window. There was no longer any effort to visualize, to reconstruct, to know, only a surrendering to the deep velvety embrace of not knowing, a peaceful dissolution into the quiet that had always waited beneath the wonder. Mysteries ceased to be questions, and became instead lullabies, their unresolved notes hanging in the mental air like motes of dust in a sunbeam, present, beautiful, and requiring no solution. The color of a raptor's feather, the sound of a sauropod's breath, the feeling of scale beneath a gentle hand, all drifted like petals on a still pond, touching the surface of awareness before sinking into the depths of dream. Curiosity, once a bright flame, now glowed as softly as embers, warming without burning, illuminating without demanding. The mind had learned that some wonders are best appreciated with closed eyes, that some truths are felt most deeply in the release of the need to prove them. In this deepened stillness, time itself seemed to soften and stretch, losing all urgency. The Cretaceous was no longer a period to be studied, but an atmosphere to be breathed, a thick, soothing air heavy with the scent of rain-wet earth and the memory of sunlight on scale. The slow turn of seasons, the drift of continents, the gentle extinction of giants, all became part of a single, seamless exhalation, a long, soft sigh that carried the dreamer deeper into repose. There was no past or future here, only an eternal now, peaceful and full, like a well that never runs dry. The body, too, surrendered to this quiet, muscles loosening, heartbeat slowing to match the imagined rhythm of a sleeping world. The weight of the blankets felt like the gentle pressure of sediment, layer upon layer of comfort and safety. The faint sounds of the modern night, the hum of a distant appliance, the rustle of a branch against the roof, blended with the dream sounds of the ancient forest, creating a symphony of softness that lulled the senses into a state of perfect trust. There was nothing to fear, nothing to hold on to, nothing to do but rest. And as sleep drew nearer, the last vestiges of thought drifted away like smoke on a still evening. The mind did not fight the dissolution. It welcomed it, recognizing that this softening was not a loss, but a return to innocence, to wholeness, to the quiet core of being that exists before words, before questions, before time. The dinosaurs, in all their grandeur and mystery, had been guides to this threshold, but now they too receded, their work done, their peace given as a gift. They left behind not answers, but a silence so deep it felt like healing, a stillness so complete it was itself a kind of wisdom. In the final moments before dreams took over entirely, there was only this, a vast, gentle darkness, warm and breathing, cradling the sleeper as it had once cradled giants. The return to silence was complete, a circling back to the beginning, to the quiet that had been there all along, waiting beneath the noise of days and the chatter of the mind. And in that silence, there was everything: connection, peace, and the soft, endless wonder of a world that knows how to rest, how to be still, how to hold all things in its tender, dreaming arms. The journey through deep time, through the soft breathing forests and star-dusted nights of a world long gone, settles now into a final gentle exhale, a moment of perfect unburdened peace. The mind, having wandered among giants and whispered with shadows, returns to itself, not empty but full, brimming with the quiet wonder of all that has been imagined, all that remains eternally mysterious. There is no need to cling to the images now. They have done their work, weaving a tapestry of calm that wraps around the spirit like a blanket woven from moonlight and memory. Gratitude blooms softly, not for answers found, but for questions lovingly held, for the gift of not knowing, for the spaciousness of a past that invites dreaming rather than demands decoding. The great dinosaurs, in all their imagined grace, recede like gentle tides pulling back from a shore, leaving behind not absence, but presence, a lingering warmth, a sense of having been in communion with something vast and kind. Their time is over, and yet it is not. It lives on in the quiet corners of the mind, in the slowed rhythm of the heart, in the deepened breath that now comes easily, naturally, as if the lungs have learned the pace of a more ancient, more patient world. There is no sorrow in this parting, only a sweet solemn thankfulness for having been allowed to visit, to wonder, to rest in the shade of their timelessness. Carry this calm curiosity forward, not as a weight but as a lightness, a feather on the breath of sleep, a star held in the pocket of the soul. Let it remind you that wonder is not a state to be achieved, but a place to return to, a quiet room within yourself where the door is always open and the light is always soft. The mysteries of the Cretaceous are not puzzles to be solved, but lullabies to be hummed, stories to be felt rather than told, invitations to trust that not everything needs to be understood to be cherished. As the eyes grow heavy and the world of today fades into the background, let the peace of that ancient night settle over you, a final gift from a time when the earth was young and life moved slowly, and silence was a language spoken fluently by all. There is no need to strive, to know, to accomplish, only to breathe, to rest, to dream. The dinosaurs sleep, the stars keep watch, the world turns soft and sure in its endless, gentle rhythm, and you are part of it all, held quiet and deeply, deeply at peace.